Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day. It's your girl, Lady Q. And I just wanted to stop by quickly today and just share something with you. I was asked to do a spoken word piece, and in my spirit, I was so full when I got there. And, I'm just going to jump right in. Um, and the Lord kept giving me, my soul doth magnify the Lord. And that's all I kept hearing over and over and over and over again. My soul doth magnify the Lord. No matter what I've gone through, my soul doth magnify the Lord. No matter how bad it's been, my soul doth magnify the Lord. Even when I have felt lost, my soul doth magnify the Lord. When people have turned their back on me, my soul doth magnify the Lord, understanding that in the midst of a situation where the enemy is seeking to destroy me, my soul doth magnify the Lord. When the Lord has something inside of me that needs to come forward, my soul doth magnify the Lord, knowing that God is an amazing God. My soul doth magnify the Lord. That means that in the depth of who I am, when I walk in what He's called me to do, that means that my soul will magnify the Lord. There's nothing that's going to stop my soul from magnifying the Lord, because it has become intertwined and intermingled with the Spirit of God, that even in my sleep, my soul will magnify the Lord. And so I wanted to encourage you and encourage somebody, because you might be going through something, and you're trying to figure out, God, you have given me this thing to do, and you have placed great responsibility in my hand, and the enemy is seeking to destroy me, but yet and still, some reason, something deep down inside is allowing my soul to worship God. You see, when we get to a place in this walk with God, it's not about our emotionalism. It's not about the things that are going on around us. It's not about material things. It's the fact that when you are going through and you can still rejoice in knowing who God is in your life, when you can get to that place where you can just sit still and hear the still small voice, and your soul is rejoicing in how magnificent God is, that means your soul has to be aware of how amazing God is. Your soul has to be aware of how great God is. Your soul has to be aware of the greatness of God in His presence. My soul does magnify the Lord. I can rejoice in knowing who God is in my life, even though the enemy is coming for me. And so these are words that Mary spoke when she met upon Elizabeth, and they began to talk, because this was after the Lord had already told Mary, you're going to become pregnant with a son, and so then Mary ended up having to leave, her and Joseph, and she meets upon her cousin Elizabeth, who's pregnant with John the Baptist, who was the forerunner for Jesus Christ. And so when they met upon each other and began to talk, Mary says to Elizabeth, "My soul doth magnify the Lord." She's realizing how amazing God is, that even though they are on the run, she's still worshiping God, even though they're on the run, because people are seeking to destroy her. People are seeking to stop that which God has already put in place. Let me help you with something. When God has placed something inside of you for a reason and for a purpose, there's nothing that man can do to take that thing from you. There's nothing that man can do to take it out of your hand. When God says, "I have something for you to birth," because there are things that need to happen for the growing of my kingdom. Understand that in that process, all you have to do is stand and rejoice in who God is. Stand and rejoice in the beauty of God. And so today, all I could keep hearing was, "My soul doth magnify the Lord." And I'm saying, "Oh God, what's before me, that in the midst of this process, my soul does magnify the Lord." And we have to understand that when we are in this process and we're walking in this process, it can get a little rough. It can get a little hard. And that's okay. That it's going to get a little rough and it's going to get a little hard, but it's about not letting go, not letting go of his unchanging hand. Is really about just staying in him, no matter what comes your way, because see, the enemy is going to try to come and destroy you and stop you and keep you from that thing that God has for you to do. You can't allow what the enemy is doing to cause a distraction or even an obstruction. Let me tell you something. The devil will always place a distraction. And even more, he gonna always try to put an obstruction in your life. And the question is, when he comes, are you so focused that you don't allow your emotions to get the best of you, and you saying, "God, why? I know I had to get out of the situation that I'm in." And when the Lord says, "I'm giving you the instructions to move, and it's time for you to move because I have a location for you to go to," are you going to be able to go to that location and still worship him and say, "My soul doth magnify the Lord," understanding that it's not about your present situation. It's about what's ahead of you. It's not about the situation that you're in right now. It's about what's ahead of you. You see, sometimes we can get caught up on the right now situation. We can get caught up on what we're going through right now in this present moment, in this present time. We can get caught up on the wrong things. And so in Psalms 139, it says, "Yea, the darkness hideth not from thee, but the night shineth as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to thee. For thou hast possessed my reins, thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, that my soul knoweth right well." That means you got to know that in the depth of who you are, that God's hand was on you in your mother's womb. God had his hand on you while you were being fashioned in the womb. He knew what you would be faced with while in utero. He knew what you would have to deal with while in utero. He knew you before the foundation of the world. So even before you was placed into the womb, he knew what you would go through, and he began to shape and mold you and said that you were fearfully and wonderfully made. And see, when God's hand is on you, there's nothing that man can do to destroy you. So let me share this with you. Before I was even born, um, there's been this saying that my mother expressed to me, that my grandmother shared with me, and in utero, there was a point that my grandmother said to my mom that that baby is in the pocket. And what had happened is that my mother was a very young lady and became pregnant with me as a teenager. And so someone came to my mom and my grandmother to give a concoction that had turpentine in it for my mother to take. And during that time, midwives or people would take and give turpentine mixed with alcohol to a young lady to cause a spontaneous abortion, what we now call a miscarriage. But actually, it's called a spontaneous abortion when you attempt to make a decision on your own when carrying a child. And so this was not a decision that my mother made. My mother wanted to keep me. My mother's desire was to have me. So this was something that another adult made the decision to present to her. And so she was given turpentine and alcohol to drink while she was pregnant with me. Now, if you know the history of what turpentine does to the body in itself, if too much is taken during that time, they use turpentine mixed with different things medicinally. And so, a young lady, a woman that was pregnant, if she took turpentine and let's say had this baby, um, it would make the baby brain dead. It would destroy the baby's lungs. Um, the baby would come out deformed. Um, um, Mental retardation is what they called it back then as well, and also kill the baby. And so the idea of giving the turpentine was to cause a spontaneous abortion, and for those women who was given this turpentine and the baby survived, the baby typically survived brain dead, lungs messed up, so all type of deformities that the baby could not survive outside the womb, or if the baby did survive outside the womb, the baby had a, 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 a plethora of disabilities. Also, at the same time, the amount of turpentine that was given to a woman while she was pregnant could also destroy her lungs as well as kill her and cause brain damage to her. These were the risk of taking the turpentine because it was taken at a larger quantity, and it was mixed with alcohol. And so this concoction was given to my mother twice. And then after the second time that it was given to her, my grandmother says to my mom, that baby is in the pocket. The Lord has his hand on that child. Now, having me during that time, they had no idea what what the outcome would be during that time. But because there was no spontaneous abortion happening, My grandmother, being a believer, said that God's hand was on my life and that I was in the pocket, which means God was covering me. He had me securely tucked with his hand on me, a particular covering that meant that I was meant to be brought forth. That what the enemy meant for me in utero, God says, no, that's my child. You are a conduit of the child that I'm going to bring into this world. So, with that being said, when I was born, obviously, no brain damage, no issues, no nothing. That looking back over my life, realizing that in utero, in the womb, the enemy sought to destroy me. But God's hand was on me. My soul doth magnify the Lord. The devil had it out for me from the time I was born. My soul doth magnify the Lord. I experienced a lot growing up. My soul doth magnify the Lord. You see, when I think about Psalms 139 and I began to read and when it talks about, for thou hast possessed my reins, this is verse 13. Thou hast covered me in my mother's womb, that even in my mother's womb, God's hand was on me. He had me covered in such a way that regardless of what the enemy thought he had for me, God's hand was on me. My soul doth magnify the Lord, because God's hand was so on me. As my grandmother said, that I was in the pocket. Knowing that I was in the pocket, that meant God had me covered. He had me particularly set up in a way that what was coming down through my mother's system that should have dislodged me from the location that I had been implanted in, I should have been removed and expelled out of her body. But God said, no, I am going to keep her planted exactly where she is supposed to be. And I'm going to keep her there for as long as she's supposed to be, because I'm doing some shaping and some molding in utero. She is coming into a place of maturity within the womb that she is not going to be birthed until I say it's time for her to come forward. Let me tell you something. My soul doth magnify the Lord, that I was in the pocket. My soul doth magnify the Lord, that no matter what you go through, the enemy is going to come trying to destroy you, and God's hand is on you because he has you in the pocket. You see, God has you tucked away that when the enemy comes, he can't take your life. Just like Job that went through his situation, just like Job, he lost everything. And and God told the enemy, you can do everything but take his life. You can take everything from him but his life. And he lost all of his possession, and he lost his children, and his wife even told him to curse God and die. My soul doth magnify the Lord, because Job remained in a space to be so faithful to God. He stayed where he was supposed to be because, see, God had him in the pocket as he was going through this situation. God had him covered. He may not have always felt like he was covered. He may not even seen the fact that what he was going through, that he was going to make it out alive. Understand, my soul doth magnify the Lord when you know that God's hand is on you and he has you in the pocket, that when the fiery darts will come, God says, I have you in a pocket and you can't be touched. I have you in the cleft of the rock. When he places you in the cleft and the storm comes and the storm cannot touch you, when he places you in the cleft and the enemy comes seeking for you and can't find you, when he places you in the cleft, he's hiding you from all the attacks that are to come your way. My soul doth magnify the Lord. You see, you got to stand in a space where you are worshiping God, even in the ugliest situations. You got to stand in a space where you are worshiping God, even when the enemy is seeking to destroy you. You got to stand in a space and understand that the Lord knew you from your mother's womb and had you covered. And this is the thing, when you realize that you are fearfully and wonderfully made, you should be praising the Lord. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, that my soul knoweth right well. Do your soul know right well that when you stand in the mirror and look at yourself, the work that God has created in you is marvelous. The work that God has created in you is wonderful. The work that God has created in you is priceless. When you stand in the mirror and look at yourself, knowing God's hand has been on you, no matter what your situation look like, do you realize that even in being made the way God has made you and created you, that you are marvelous in his eyes? But your soul have to know right well that you are marvelous in his eyes, that you ought to know that you are a masterpiece in which he has created. Because see, God don't create half of a masterpiece. He don't create some kind of masterpiece. You see, when he created you, he created only one you. Anybody can look like you, but they are not you. Understanding that you are a marvelous piece of work that has been fearfully and wonderfully made, which means you are purposed for a reason. God has purposed you to do a work. God has purposed you for this time. God has purposed you for this season, and he's placed something inside of you to bring forward. My soul doth magnify the Lord, because my soul know right well that he is magnificent. My soul know right well that he is the creator. My soul know right well that he is my protector. My soul know right well that he is the lifter of my head. My soul know right well that he is the healer of my body. My soul know right well that he'll take care of every issue. My soul know right well that God knows the thoughts that he thinks of me, and it's not to harm me. My soul know right well that God is the one true and living God, and marvelous is his work. So when you're standing in the mirror looking at yourself, you got to be able to see that you was created by the hand of God. You got to see that God has placed his hand on you. You got to see that he had you in the pocket when the enemy came to seek to kill and destroy you. My soul doth magnify the Lord. My soul know right well that I am marvelous in his eyes, that I am fearfully and wonderfully made, that I am a daughter of the Most High, a daughter of a king. Hallelujah. When you know your place and you know your position and you know God's hand is on your life, it doesn't matter what people have to say about you. It doesn't matter if somebody's trying to stick a knife in your back. It doesn't matter, because see, when your soul knows right well who God is and what he's doing and what he's shaping and what he's molding, what he's rotting out of your life, that even sometimes he has to be the gardener of your life where it's time to prune and cut off some things? Does your soul know right well that even in the pain of the cutting, there's going to be a flourishing that's going to come out of that? Because if you understand the process of pruning, you prune something that is going to bear a greater amount because of the pruning. When things begin to grow, if you are planting vegetables in your garden, or you have certain plants and you see the growth when it's time for it to be harvested, and then because of the growth, when you cut it back, the next season produces more than the last season because you pruned it. And so sometimes God has to be the gardener that begins to cut with the shears in order for us to continue to flourish and grow even the more. Sometimes he's the vine dresser. He's taking care of everything that's inside of us and what comes out of us, that he dresses us in such a way, knowing that your soul knows right well who God is in your life, that because your soul knows right well, you can trust him even when you can't trace him, because you understand that it's not about what you feel. It's not about a feeling. It's about knowing who you are and whose you are. It's about knowing where you are and what position you stand in. And when you know where you are in the position that you stand in, you don't have to waver to the right or to the left, because he has made your crooked path straight and he has you on the straight and narrow path. And you don't have to worry about what's coming your way. That God is such a great God that even if you can't deal with the situation because he knows where you are, he's going to take you around the situation, just like he did the children of Israel when they came upon going into the wilderness, knowing what was ahead of them would cause so much discouragement for them. He said, now I'm going to take you around the situation. What's waiting for you is going to miss you because you're going to go around it. And while they still waiting on you, you're going to be on the other side and they won't even know that you're there. So understand, God being who God is, he know what he placed inside of you. He know how he's fashioned you because he did it from the foundation of the earth. And when you were in your mother's womb, he saw fit to bring you forward with purpose. My soul doth magnify the Lord. My soul knows right well the magnificent God that sits on high, that knows every situation and issue that I'm going through, that he sees me fearfully and wonderfully made, and I am marvelous in his eyes. You are marvelous in his eyes. Your soul should know where you stand in God. When you look at yourself, don't focus on who you used to be. Focus on who God is transforming you into be. You see, oftentimes we get caught up on, I messed up. I did this, I did that, and this is who I used to be, and this is who people saying I used to be. But who is God transforming you into? Who is God making you out to be? You see, we can even get so caught in the right now that we miss what God has ahead of us. Our right now sometimes become the obstruction because we so caught up on the right now that it becomes an obstruction that we can't even see where we going. We can't even see what's ahead of us. God says, I have something great for you that's ahead of you, and you sitting stuck in right now. God, it ain't great. God, right now, it ain't working out. God, right now, it ain't what I wanted to be. God, right now, it ain't what I thought it was going to be. God says, I have something great for you that is ahead of you. Are you going to stay focused on the obstruction, or are you going to go around it? Are you going to move it out the way? Are you going to speak to it and tell it, you got to go because I got something to do? Understand. Your soul needs to be in position to magnify the Lord. Your soul needs to be in position that you know right well who you are and what God is doing in you. Your soul needs to be so connected with God that there's nothing that can disconnect you from God. So I encourage you that even though around you it may not seem pretty, but knowing that because God created you, He's purposed you for you to move forward. All you got to do is trust Him. Walk in the obedience of what He's called you to walk into. And God will take care of every situation. In your obedience, you are delivered. In your obedience, you are healed. In your obedience, you are elevated. In your obedience, there's a birthing taking place. In your obedience, there's a breakthrough happening. In your obedience, you come into a space with God that you've never experienced before. In your obedience, you experience intimacy with God. Not because of law, but because the fact that obedience is giving you life. The obedience gives you strength. The obedience gives you endurance. The obedience gets you to a place where you know God unlike you've ever known Him before. The obedience allows your relationship with God to become so strong that it cannot be broken. And in that space, you are placed into the cleft. You are put into the pocket. You are covered by God. So I encourage you to be in that space with God and just rest in it. Let go of the noise. Let go of the distractions. But hold on to God. You be blessed. It's your girl, Lady Q. And you have an amazing morning, afternoon, evening, and day. Good evening.